This is the Emotional Horsemanship Podcast. I am Lockie Phillips, your host. Emotional Horsemanship coaches deeply caring horse people to train emotionally balanced horses with science, empathy, and feel. And this is the podcast dedicated to exploring all of that within. We try to innovate horse training that puts the horse first. Season 2 of this podcast brings us solo episodes, special guests, and small groups of guests as we discuss horses, horse training, the equestrian industry, and the big, beautiful ideas that horses inspire in us always. My guest on the podcast today is my friend Tora Troop. Tora Troop was actually at my first clinic that I did ever, and since then has become a really valued member of my student community. She's also a really lovely person that I've spent some time with personally outside of work too. Tora has now started a new line of work, and she calls herself a shamanic death doula. Tora is assisting pet owners, horse owners in having a plan, navigating, and being all right with the eventual end of their animals or their horse's life. This is a subject that doesn't see a lot of light of day for obvious reasons, and it can be a really dark and heavy subject for some people and a really bright and beautiful subject for others. I think this conversation brought a lot of lightness, a lot of beauty, and a lot of love to the discussion around the end of our horses' lives and how to navigate that well. This was the first podcast interview I've done where I struggled to keep my stuff together emotionally throughout this episode in a really beautiful way. Thank you, Tora, for coming, and I hope you love this episode. I'm sitting here on a beautiful Sunday with my friend Tora Troop. Hello, Tora.
Hello, Lucky. How are you?
I'm good. We had a little chat before we got recording as per usual, but this is just to let everyone else into the conversation, not just to let us into the conversation. This is your first podcast ever, right?
First podcast ever.
You're going to blow us all away, I have a feeling, not to put too fine a point on it. But Tora, let me start with the first question for the first podcast. Who are you? What do you do? And how do you do it?
You know, I've known this question is coming. It's a tricky one to kind of sit with, but I would start by saying I am a deeply feeling, deeply curious human being. I have always resonated most deeply from the start with animals and horses particularly. And of course, people too, but animals are definitely my family, my soul family, my purpose, my reason to get up out of bed in the morning and keep doing what I'm doing. And it is through them that I have genuinely learned or met the people that are in my life or ended up where I am now. I can trace all of it back to either particular animals or the experiences that I lived with them. And they have also, or I am also somebody who now views the world through a shamanic lens, through the interconnectedness that we all have with each other and with the natural world that I feel is harder for people to tap into these days, but more necessary than ever. And it really, that is my lens through which I view the entire world at this point, which I'm grateful for. And what do I do? I am just launching into a death doula for animals realm, and horses are primary in that. I also spend my time teaching little kids outside and trying to bring them back in their connection with nature as best as we can. But the animal work and this death doula work is my passion project. I mean, I was just telling you earlier that I love talking about it. I love doing it. It really lights me up in a way that I think a lot of people kind of look at me sideways for, but I've lived it a lot. I've experienced a lot. And I truly believe that there is incredible magic and wisdom to be found in greeting death as a friend. And it's I will die on that hill.
So you are someone who actually walks children in nature for a living.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like morally and ethically, you're already, leaps and bounds ahead of us, they say. It's like it's circulating in popular culture. If someone criticizes another person, that other person is supposed to say, well, I don't see you walking children in nature. Well, Tora, you actually do walk children in nature as a day job, but you've been building towards your role in your new venture for quite some time. Before we
Yes.
get there, just so people can, for their own interest, understand how we know each other. Would you like to tell that story, or we can tell it together? You start.
Yeah, let's tell it together. I found you through the happy, sometimes wonderful thing of the Instagram algorithm.
Sometimes
At a
wonderful. Yeah.
time where sometimes wonderful, yep. At a time when I was starting to completely overhaul my horsemanship, my entire mindset and relationship with my horses, after 22 years in the conventional horse world. That Riser, my mare, was making it clear this ain't working. Um, and so I had started with a trainer local to me who was a bit more natural horsemanship. Um, she was great, but it still wasn't quite clicking and lining up for
For you.
what felt like would actually work for me for Riser. Yep. And Instagram at one point, I think it was a reel or something of yours. I don't even remember, but it was a post, and it was literally, I want to say, a week or 10 days before you were starting your very first clinic tour, which happened to be in Gilroy, California, 45 minutes down the road from me. And I was like, okay. So I I actually messaged you, I think, about a question with transitioning to 24/7 hay, because I hadn't done that yet. And I had tried it once before. It hadn't seemed to really work. I had shifted away from it, whatever. So you immediately responded and engaged with me that way. And then I came down and audited, I believe it was the second day of that clinic, because the first day I think was during work. Um, and also met Lori there in passing, although didn't fully come to realize who Lori
Realize.
was until
Yeah.
later. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I mean, that was the first horse clinic I've ever gone to. I was always somebody that kind of stayed away from the clinic scene because it just didn't really suit me. But I knew it was an opportunity to come and connect with you, and it would be silly to waste it since you're usually halfway across the world. So I did that, and then I had some random brave, bold moment to walk up to you and say, "Hey, can you come do a lesson with me too?" Which you very kindly did. Um, that was a very different feeling lesson and time together right off the bat, in a way that I was like, okay, this is different. I think the thing that most jumped out to me, I think, was a recognition in how you really truly view your horses, which is similar to me in that they are family and friends first, and anything else that we kind of build with them is icing on the cake. Um, and yeah, since I mean, that's the rest is history, I guess, as they say. Since then we've grown leaps and bounds, me and the ladies together, and in our communication together, and my entire mindset and approach to horses has shifted. I was realizing even just a couple days ago, I was remembering that like not 6 months, I think, before we connected, I was truly at the point of being like, maybe I just need to find a retirement place for them and ship them off and like pay for them and call it good, right? I was just kind of at that point. And no longer, no longer am I, nor could I fathom that. So, um, yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful to have crossed paths with you and to be here now.
Likewise, those were the good old days when someone would send me a message on Instagram or whatever, I could always reply in detail. Those were the good old days.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that opportunity anymore. And sometimes I do. There are fleeting moments where someone crossed paths with me at the right time of day, and I happen to be situated with focus to actually attend to it. But if I can't attend to someone's messages properly, I'm not going to attend to it at all. I'm not going to give them a glancing, interaction. And so those were the good old days. And I'm very grateful for that first clinic in Gilroy. I learned a lot from it. And a lot of the seeds of the clinics that I do now, of course, were present there. And there were some really important relationships present at that clinic for me that have come out of it. And I don't do private lessons on clinic tours anymore either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe to my own detriment, because I could be missing out from meeting someone like you in the future, or more people like you in the future. So that's also my lesson, to not totally shut the door to things that extend me or extenuate me past where I am right now. I've just had to put a lid on it for a while because expansion's been a little tricky to navigate. We'll talk about that. But I remember sitting in Warwick Schiller's kitchen at his home in Hollister before he moved where he is now. And he had invited me very kindly. And he was talking. And I had gone out and done some stuff with his horses that caused him to say a few things towards me. And it was all very fine. But I said, Warwick, thanks so much, but I gotta go. I've got to go teach a lesson with Torah. I cut him mid-sentence and said, well, it's been lovely, but I've got a Torah to go see. And I did.
Yeah,
and so I drove from Hollister up to where you are and met with you and with your lovely ladies and your beautiful farm. And, now we've been together ever since. But now we're shifting into this new space. You call yourself a death doula. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what a death doula is, could you give us, we're going to do this. We're going to do 3 different explanations as an exercise.
All right. I love
You're going to explain a death doula as if I'm 5 years old.
Okay.
Then explain a death doula as if I'm a teenager. And then explain a death doula as if I'm a death doula also.
All right. All right. Well, I'll start at the 5 years old level. So
Yes.
death doula, it's somebody who can be a friend when something really sad and hard is happening. As somebody who can offer support, who can give you a hug, metaphorically or literally, who can help just walk next to you when you're going through something that's really hard and that feels really hard, and can feel sad and lonely. And yeah, okay. As a teenager, I was thinking, I think that's where it is for a 5-year-old. As a teenager, I would say I'm somebody who can be right alongside you in your anger and in your sadness and in your wondering why and in your lamenting against or railing against the reality that is. and also gently remind you that we cannot avoid this part of the process, nor should we, and that you will be okay through it, and it will be hard as heck, and it will be something that might tear you apart, but you're going to come out the other side, and we're going to walk through that together as best as we can.
Tumultuous teenagers, huh?
Yeah.
From hugs to tearing you asunder. Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
that many of my core loss experiences were from 12 to 24. So I had several back to back, and that is anger was very present. And that was the one that dominated. And yeah, so that, I mean, as if I'm speaking to another death doula, I would say that, I am here to shine the light in what can feel when you're like stuck in a dark forest. I mean, like my hope and my goal is to always provide a sense of safety and comfort and support that feels like the light that will come, especially when it feels like that light is gone forever, because it's not, but it can be hard to find it. And oftentimes I think, especially in the realm with animals, there's an added layer of challenge to it for animal guardians, I believe, because sometimes either people don't fully understand, if they don't have animals themselves, or if they have a different relationship with their animals, they don't fully understand the depth of the grief that can be present. In my personal experience, it can be much more profound than the passing of other humans that I've known and cared for deeply, just because the relationships are different. There's a different depth to the relationship that you don't often, or for me personally, don't often find that specific quality in relationships with humans. And so it's just trying to honor that and be present for it, and remind people that they are not crazy for feeling this way, or they aren't silly for feeling this way, and that it is part of the process, and that through that process there is also a lot of magic and beauty and invitation for growth and deeper understanding that's being presented to us as well.
It's needed. Very, very needed. It's hard to describe the way people like us connect with animals. Not just you and me, but people who we tend to run into, yes. The circles we walk with, the way we connect with our animals. I'm lucky to have not lost a horse who's been very close to me. I've lost many horses that have been associated, but not any of my nearest and dearest have passed yet. It'll come. I have lost a cat, and his brother's on the desk right now, and I've lost a dog. And in my adult life, in my childhood, there was more, but in my adult life, those two deaths, both of them, shook me deeply to my core, rocked my world, and were painful beyond what I even had imagined could be. I was present for both of those deaths. With the cat, he passed in my hands. He woke me up in the middle of the night. He was very sick, and he was screaming in his cage where he was quarantined because he was contagious. He had feline leukemia. We didn't know it. But he was dying, and he woke up 3 o'clock in the morning screaming. And I was listening to him scream thinking, I can't do nothing. I can't do nothing. It's 3 a.m. It's 3 a.m. Just sit in bed. And then he made a noise that was a primal noise. And without thinking, I overrided my prefrontal cortex and I'm up out of the bed by his side. Because the noise, I'd never heard it before. It was a command presence, as they say in the police force, a command presence from this little young cat. And I got to him and I held him in my hands. And he was like my little brother. I named him Kin because he was my kin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I held him in my hand and he made these 5 or 6 little noises that sounded like relief, little sighs of relief. And then looking at me, he took his last breath and he went as he was in my hand. He woke me up in the morning because he knew he was going.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted me to hold him when that happened. No one can convince me otherwise.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When my little dog passed, she was very ill. She had cancer, multiple surgeries, and she was doing not so great. And she had a night where she was just very low. She was cold. She was very constipated, which is an end of life sign with cancer. And we took her out to go to the bathroom and she didn't really go. And she just sort of looked at me. She looked at me and I thought she's in pain. So I gave her some tramadol, which is, again, end of life medication.
Yep.
She had the tramadol and within 2 minutes, she had enough comfort to go and take herself to the water. She had some water. And then she crawled underneath the bed where I was watching Netflix. And she laid under the bed directly underneath me, under the bed, where she felt the best. And respectfully, quietly, demurely, while I was watching Netflix, she laid underneath me and she went. And she would have come up through me as she left. When we went to check on her before bed, I leant over the side of the bed and there she was. She was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And wrapped her up in the jacket I was wearing when I found her. And those 2 deaths really were extremely challenging. I already know that when one of my horses in particular passes away, whether it's this year or in another 20 years, I already know that I'm going to have to take off work. There's going to be all sorts of things that have to happen. I know I'm already aware of that, but I'm a weirdo. I welcome things like this in. I know the responsibilities, but that's not necessarily normal, right?
Right.
Just speak to that if you can.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm with you in that weirdo sense. So, I mean, I lost my first horse when I was almost 12. It was a few weeks before I was turning 12. I had only had him 4 months, but he's the first horse, and his name was Ernie. He was a super sweet 17-year-old flea-bitten gray Arabian, gentlest guy you could imagine. Let me do all the stupid, silly kid stuff that we love to do with horses, and and he died suddenly. And then I've lost another mare of mine, Harley. She died in 2010. She had a year-long battle of what's called immune-mediated thrombocytopenia, more common in dogs than it is horses. Very rare in horses, very rare for it to persist in horses. And it did for her in a year. And finally I was like, this is too much, right? She lived most of that last year on prednisone and Dex and, heavy course of antibiotics. Not antibiotics, steroids. My childhood dog died in 2007 suddenly. And then my dog Bay, and he'll come up a lot, I think, in this conversation, because he is the reason why I'm standing here doing this. So like his loss, all of those were very challenging, but his is the one that kind of set off a whole different route for me. And I named him Bay after Harley because her registered name was Lady Bay Harley. Got him right out of college. Always loved border collies. He was my dream boy. He chose me truly. When I went to meet his litter at 5 weeks old, I had my eye on another one, and he came up and plopped into my lap and stayed with me that the whole 5 hours I was there and never left. And he died at 4 because he had lost his. Well, he had an accident when he was like 2 or 3 weeks old. Mom had accidentally stepped on his elbow, which they told me when they, at the start, they had it checked out then, didn't seem to be any issues. It took the first 6 months of his life to finally diagnose what was going on because basically he would be three-legged lame for a day and then he'd be fine. And then he'd be three-legged lame for a day and then he'd be fine. And what happened was that the growth plate in that joint, in the elbow joint, had fractured, but it had fractured right along the growth plate, so they couldn't see it. The only reason that they finally found it was because the joint had kept trying to heal and refracturing, which is when he got lame. And so the joint itself was wrecked by 6 months old. So I made the choice to amputate that leg. And he lived a huge, wildly fulfilling life in those 4 years. And I always knew that he would have a shorter time frame because my philosophy, especially with him, but even more so now, I think is just let them live. I let him do things that I'm sure helped that front leg break down faster than it would have, but he loved it. He lived big, and I'm not gonna stand here and be in his way for that. And so that remaining front leg finally was collapsing under him, basically. And so I opted to let him go on May 6, 2016. And yeah, I mean, as you say, like it's a different type of grief. I've lost grandparents. I've lost some family friends. I love and miss them dearly, but it's a very different type of grief that comes up with these animals. And like Bay was, again, got him right out of college. So he moved with me from here to New York City, back here again to Colorado, back again. So like he was my boy, he was the one that lived through those young adult years. I had Sky at the time, of course, but she stayed put here in California because she was safe and trusted. And, I knew her care was exceptional in lieu of my absence. So, he did all of that with me, and having to make what I have found, whether it's sudden or not, and I've not had the experience of an animal transitioning on their own. I think that's a beautiful experience in and of itself too. But having the responsibility and the option to make the choice to end suffering can be really challenging. But I will also go to the grave saying that it is the most important and the most loving decision that we can make for these animals that we love so much. And it's really hard. It's really hard to separate out a feeling of playing God or taking life away from them or, robbing them of what if they could have a few more days or weeks or months, right? I mean, I'm kind of in that phase right now, actually, with my old dog Phoenix, and she is about 12 and a half. She's a rescue, so don't know for sure. That's another one, kind of like what you were saying with your horse. Like she is, on the one hand, I know that losing her I'm going to have to take some time off work. I'm going to have to plan for it and take time and grieve. But I'm also actually really excited for her because she had a rough life at the start. She was a stray on the Navajo reservation in Fort Defiance in Arizona. She literally has a bullet in her side still. She has one leg that's shorter than the other. I mean, she came and it took her a long time to kind of open up to the world and to kindness and to love. And she is pure love, but she's living in a body that doesn't feel great anymore, and I can see that. I know that. Um, and so there's a lot of internal conversation I find that happens around, okay, where are my boundaries? Where are my comfort levels with what I'm going to ask this animal to endure for me, right? And those are all deeply personal things. We can't answer that for each other, nor can a vet answer that for us. I love and honor vets. I've worked alongside them. They have the brutal task of carrying this out, and it is hard on them. I have been there as a vet tech. I have been there as a client. I've been there on both sides of it, and it's rough and it's hard, and they feel it. But nobody knows our animals like we do, and nobody can answer what is the quality of life that our beloved animals deserve better than we can, right? And we kind of take on that obligation, whether or not we're conscious of it, when we add a new animal to the family, whether they're born into it or you bring one home. And so I think thinking of these things in advance is huge because it is a reality that we all have to face, right? And it is something that will come, and thinking of it and being aware of it and bringing death into the room before it's imminent allows us to begin to really discern and evaluate for ourselves and for our animal what feels right and what feels best before we're faced with an emotionally charged, time sensitive or just emotionally wrought situation, right?
Or an
It
emergency.
allows us to find those.
Or an emergency.
Yep, absolutely. Or an emergency. And that's where I think about this quite often with like, and with Phoenix, I put together an advanced care plan, as they call it, as part of the coursework for my death doula certification, because, they speak of like, if you sit down, you can do it even for a young dog that you just bring home, right? Like, sure, it might change and adapt, but just like we should for ourselves, like if you put it on paper before you're actually faced with these really tough decisions that may or may not come up, but most likely will in some capacity, right? Then you can have that to reference back to when you are in a time of emotional distress, or, when you're really feeling it, right? For me, in that process, I've learned that because of the journey that I walked with Bay, he was on 5 heavy-duty painkillers every day for the last 4 to 5 months of his life, just to be able to motivate through, right? I look back now, the only regret that I've ever had is that I didn't make the call sooner when I've had to make the call, right? I've never wished that it was later, and granted, they're gone, right? So we don't know what the later looks like. But when I've felt regret, it's only been around not doing it sooner, because you can look back with clearer eyes and be like, yeah, like that was rough, right? But Bay let me know when he was ready, and then I honored that. With Phoenix, like, because of that experience, my boundary for her is like, I will not ask her to live on more than 2 painkillers. And she's on 1 right now, right? And even then, like, I'm, again, with the animal that's in front of us, she is a dog that I've always joked, but it's a joke rooted in reality, of course, that if I were to go away sometime and not come back home, she's one of those dogs that would stay in the exact same spot and not move until she died too. Like, that is her level of loyalty and commitment to me and bondedness to me, right? She comes with me every day to work with the kids. Her safety is in me, and I know that and I feel that. And I will not ask her to live with much more pain than she currently has now. And I say that because she has aches and pains. She's got at least 4 of her 5 major joints are shot with arthritis. She's struggling, and I'm keeping a very close eye on it. I knew heading into this past Christmas and holiday season, I knew it was her last. And so she's leading me through a new process with it, in that I acknowledge that. I recognize that. I told the people that love her best, my family and my friend and business partner, Amy, who loves her dearly. And I told them, like, this is going to be her last Christmas. I don't know when it's going to be, but it will be soon. And I still say I don't know when it's going to be. I suspect it will be in the next couple months. But it's again a new lesson for me, because I'm getting comfortable with the reality that she likely is not going to let me know that she's ready. The others in the past have, right? In their own way, they've let me know that they're ready. She likely won't. And that's, it's a new journey and walk in navigating, again, that sense of guilt, right? Because there's a very real sense for me of, well, if she's not quite ready, can I really feel comfortable with holding the line that I feel I need to hold? And that's a process. It's a process that is still unfolding.
I'm going to tell something a little bit more personal. I almost never tell stuff from my private life in my business, because as much as people out there would like to know who I am, that is none of your damn business. My life is mine, not yours. But I digress. When I say we, my partner, Mickey, my boyfriend, for all intents and purposes, my husband. One of the reasons we moved to Spain is so that could one day be actually a reality legally. He had a dog, and her name was Lola. And she died just over a year and a half ago at over 17 years old. He got Lola for his 12th birthday. And he was, 17 some years older when she left. He did not know and barely remembered life without Lola, because all his life, she needed walking, she needed feeding. He's lived in dozens and dozens of homes and 2 countries, and there she was.
Yes.
She also represented the breakdown of his parents' marriage, the passing of his grandmother, his adolescence, his teenage years, his loss of other relationships, the presence of my relation. She represented all of that. Lola was indomitable, devoted to Mickey, couldn't give a rat's butt about nobody else.
Yeah.
And he was devoted to her. When she started to get ill shortly after we moved to Spain, I thought every 3 months, this is it. This is it. And through Mickey's determination, my determination, because I was hospital ambulance driver and the vet was 2 hours drive away, one way, where we used to live, right? So I had no money, desperately trying to work, and now I've got to drive 2 hours for Lola's eye or Lola's this or Lola's that. And we did it, Sometimes I had no car and we had to borrow cars from friends to drive Lola down to the vet. And every 3 months I thought, this is it, this is it, this is it. And she just rallied, she rallied, she rallied, she rallied. And for 4.5 years, she rallied. And Mickey, I think also, and I also privately said to Lola, please don't go until we get home. And when I say home, I mean we finally landed in our permanent home where we are now, because our life in the south of Spain was very, very unstable and very scary sometimes. And we didn't want to lose her inside that instability and that driftlessness. Don't leave us here.
Right.
My dog had to leave us there because she's like, no, I'm the security guard. I'm going out ahead of you to prepare the home. So watch me, so she went out. But Lola made it. She made it home. And I was on a clinic tour when she died. And that was better because the kind of pain my loved one went through was too volatile even for me to witness.
Mm-hmm.
He could only do it on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And I could feel that she was trying to go. And he was saying, please stay.
Yeah.
Please stay.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, motherfucker, you're on. I'm going to stay.
Challenge accepted.
So a few days before she died, he was sending me videos and talking, of course. She wasn't waking up. He was trying to wake her up for food and walks and pee and toilet. And at this stage, he had to carry her down the stairs of the house because she couldn't walk. But she was only half rousing from sleep. It was like her soul was half here, half gone.
Mm-hmm.
She was living in transition.
Yes, she was moving out ahead. Absolutely.
And he took her to the vet, and the vet said her kidneys are in failure. She needs hydration. So they hydrated her. 2 hours later, I get a video. She's cantering out of the vet office. She's like, I feel great now. Off she went. And I'm like, okay, she's rallied again. Crap. It's just been like 4 years of extremists. And many times I doubted my partner, and I said to him, if you're asking me, I think it's unfair and she needs to go. And he got very upset with me and he said, I know my girl.
Mm-hmm.
I am watching it. Every day he was scoring her. He was doing a quality of life score. And if she got below a certain number, he was going to call it. He said, you've got to trust me that I'll know. But he said, I am determined and she is determined to have as much time together as possible. She's going, beagles live for many years. She wants to live to 24. We'll see if the body can get there. She had one eye and that eye was blind. So she couldn't see anymore,
Mm-hmm.
And 2 days after the kidneys and the hydration, he wrote me and said she doesn't want to wake up. And I said, Mickey.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I know.
Mm-hmm.
And our beautiful vet from the local village who does house calls, even though they're 2 minutes drive away, they do house calls, which is heaven.
Yes.
And she's a dog person. She's got like 17 dogs, right? She came to the house and gave Lola her sweet release in our bedroom, in her bed with Mickey right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of anything better. And he was absolutely right. It was not my place to intervene. I was just concerned that he wasn't going to be able to make the decision, that he wasn't compos mentis enough to make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I was tired. I was tired of witnessing the extremists. I was exhausted from it. He was exhausted. He's still exhausted. He's still exhausted a year and a half later. To this day, I can hardly speak with him about Lola. I can't even say her name. His background on his phone is revolving photos of Lola. He has had grief counseling at my insistence in regards to Lola, but to this day, and when Bruce and Mikra leave us, our dogs right now, he has expressed the possibility that he would like a period of his life without dogs because it's just been too hard.
Mm-hmm.
So this conversation is very close to home for me, and I'm assuming for many people listening. In fact, this conversation is home because we all go home eventually. Wherever home is, we all go home eventually. And walking around butt ass naked, pretending like it's never going to happen. And then suddenly it's a big old surprise and you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I've seen horses and not only horses, but I've seen horses get into big trouble because someone was not prepared for their transition.
Yes.
So I'd like to speak with you a little bit more about, as a death doula preparing for transition, how you support that, how you steward that, and what we can look for in that process.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that it's it can be easy is not quite the right word, but it can be tempting, I'll say, to kind of put blinders on, right? And I think especially with any of these animals, but especially with horses, actually. I was speaking with someone the other day about it, and I think in many ways, since horses are they're so big, right? They're so present when they are doing well. And so there's a different quality to when they start to go out ahead, right? And when they do, and well, like what you're speaking of with Lola there, I think they absolutely do start, any of the animals, they start to
Going out ahead.
Yep, they start to go out ahead. There'll be a difference in their presence, every day or with you, or there's just a different quality to their beingness that comes about when they're starting to go out ahead. So, I mean, the starting point is always going to be conversation, right? It's always going to be holding space, but also inviting the conversation around it, because I think that's also, it's hard for people to talk about, especially if you're talking to other people that love the animal, right? Even if they don't love them the same way that you do, right? Like, if they know and love the animal, it's going to be hard for them to have that conversation too, right? So my role as a death doula is I can come in and I can be a third party who wants to hear and love your animal too, but is able to also hold that space without my own emotional projection onto it, right? Because I don't know the animal directly, right? Or even if I do, they still aren't my animal, and it's still able to view the bigger picture, right? Kind of zoom back out and look at the entirety of what might be going on, to the extent that the person is able and willing to share that, right? And as an animal death doula, though, I also focus, like, I believe a huge part of it is in advocating for the animal. And by advocating for the animal, I don't mean that it's not my place to come in and say, well, it's time that you do X, Y, or Z, right?
We're going to take a break. You're listening to this podcast free to air, and it is such an honor to present these episodes to anyone who has the time or desire to listen to them. It took me several years to have the ability to have a podcast, because for a number of years I simply didn't have the time or the luxury. Even today, I edit and publish these episodes using my personal time to do so. And listen, I'm not complaining, because this is a really, really wonderful way to spend my free time. But I just want you as the listener to be aware that nothing in this world is for free. Someone is paying for you to listen here for free. And that's me. I'm paying so that you can listen here for nothing. The only way I'm able to produce podcasts is if I have enough work happening in the background to facilitate the time spent to put these episodes together. I have no sponsors. Nobody is hiring me to make these. I make these podcasts because as soon as I can create free materials, I will. I have a YouTube channel for the same reason, but I hardly ever use it or put anything out there because I just don't have the luxury of time to spend making those videos properly for YouTube, even though I want to. I'm hoping to change that in the future. So if you're listening, I want you to know about ways that you can support this podcast, which enables it to continue into the future. The easiest way is to sign up for my Patreon, which I call my video library. I put new content there twice per week, every week, and there is an enormous list of educational materials there already. Very soon, that video library is transforming into a vastly improved platform called the Emotional Horsemanship School, and subscribers to the Patreon will get early bird special access to it very soon. Subscriptions start as little as €5 per month, and you can sign up for 1 month or 12, no pressure. And if you're listening to this episode beyond the year of 2025, the Emotional Horsemanship School is probably already open. So if you wish to support my work on a budget, that is the best way to do it, and you are helping to keep this podcast going. The link for sign up is in the notes of the show below, and you can also go to emotionalhorsemanship.com and navigate to the video library page or the Emotional Horsemanship School page and follow all of the instructions for sign up. Thank you for supporting my work and allowing me to continue bringing these amazing people to you free to the air. Now, let's go back to my conversation with my friend and animal death doula, Tora Troop.
Don't mean that I'm going to, it's not my place to come in and say, well, it's time that you do X, Y, or Z, right? But what I can do is I can reflect back what is being shared about where that animal is. I can say, for example, like you're sharing that your horse is struggling to get up when they lay down to roll, or, whatever it might be. I can reflect it back in a way that's, I believe, offers people the ability and the opportunity to hear it again and to hear it from somebody that isn't right there with them or viewing the same thing. That can sometimes make it easier to truly recognize wherever that lands on their comfort scale of, is this right for this animal, right? And then also, like, there's tangible support in that I'm more than happy and able to help research care providers in the area, if you, or explore options for post-life cremations or burials or whatever it might be. And even, like, I'm not a medical professional, but even talking through, here's what happens, like if it's somebody's first euthanasia, let's say, right? Like, here's what happens when it happens, right? I was remembering in the conversation I was having the other day, I was remembering that, like, I remember it being so helpful to me when I put Harley down, because Ernie, with my first horse, I wasn't present with him, and so I couldn't be present with him. So Harley was the first horse of mine she was the first animal that I fully made the choice to let go, and then that I was present with. And my barn owner and dear friend at the time, I remember her explaining to me, like, just so you know, because she'd been there many times. She said, just so you know, like, sometimes with horses, with all of the animals, but with horses, it's bigger, right? Sometimes when they've been sedated and when the drugs are administered, it can look big, right? Their body can move, it can shift, it can, sometimes the laying down is not as graceful as one would hope. It's the reality of navigating this process with big animals, but it's also just the reality. It's the scientific reality, right? So she explained to me that, like, if and when that happens, it's not the animal consciously making those movements, or like the animal's, like, she's no longer consciously present, right? She's already off ahead. And so and Harley's was,
it's not suffering. This is just muscle twitch.
Exactly. It's
electrical
not fighting
signals.
against.
Yes. It's not saying, what are you doing to me? It's not. Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Yep. And Harley's was blissfully peaceful, all things considered. But I remember being very grateful to have that perspective in mind, given that it was the first walk with a horse for me, right? And then even working as a vet tech in later years, and the vets would tell clients the same often if they were present. And there were some that were along those lines of, the muscles are twitching, the legs are twitching. Sometimes there's even, like, a nicker or a sound. And and even then, when you know what's happening, of course, it's hard, but it helps to have that context, right? So that's also, like, one of my primary goals as a doula, is to help just provide context, and then also just affirmation and acknowledgement for what is happening, and that it is really hard, and it's okay that it's really hard, and you will feel guilt, and you will doubt yourself, and you will wonder the what ifs. But in that after process, And that's another aspect to it that, it's somebody can seek me out, even if the animal's been passed for a long time, or if they died suddenly or whatnot, because there is still that processing, right, that happens. And to be able to provide a non-judgmental and compassionate space to talk about that, right? Even just to share stories. Like I remember after Bay died, like that was where like I just wanted to talk about him. Like I just wanted to hear his name again and say his name again. And friends were able to a certain extent, right? But there comes a point when you're saying the same thing to people that also knew him, it feels kind of like, okay, well, here we go again, right? Like so even just to have somebody that like you like just like, hey, I just want to talk about this being again, right? Because by talking about them, we can bring their energy back into the space, right? They can be brought back in some way, and we can connect even more to them in some way. And that's not only okay, but that's important, right? And in doing that, I believe that we find and learn even more things about them, about ourselves, about our own interconnectedness. I mean, um, I can literally trace how Bay's death has brought me to this exact moment where I am right now, speaking here with you, including having crossed paths with you, having like all of these things, right? Even though, yes, like met you through the horses, but all the entire journey literally only happened because he died and because of the grief process that I had and the ways that I continued to and still continue to feel him and like feel his nudges and feel his energy or his presence in ways that kind of tip me off that I'm on the right track, right? Like that. And that's his gift in his death. And I believe that that's available to all of us in whatever unique way applies for that person or that animal. And it's also being that space to remind people of that, right? To look for those moments. And if they feel them, it's so easy to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm just being crazy. This is like, no, stop it. You're not being crazy. Like if you feel that, if that's what it is for you, then that is what it is. I don't care if you can scientifically prove it or not. If you're feeling that, if you're feeling the presence of your animal, if you're feeling that they're saying, go over here, or if you just feel them next to you, they're there, right? That's where I land on it.
Death as advocacy work, in a sense. If we are interested in welfare, proper care, proper husbandry, horse keeping, animal keeping, stewardship, and good, righteous, not self-righteous, righteous treatment of those animals throughout their lives, if we are interested in all of those things, to drop the ball at the 11th hour when it counts the most.
Yes.
And I don't say this lightly. This is the worst word I could ever use ever.
Mm-hmm.
It is a shame to drop the ball at the 11th hour. That's the worst word I personally could ever employ in any situation is the word shame. Nobody deserves shame. Nobody deserves shame. But because you and I both know what it feels like to live with shame, right? Anyway, but to drop the ball at the 11th hour is a shame. And death work as advocacy work. So I'm understanding that the death doula's job is communication and preparation. So you're stepping in early, if possible, to prepare the animal owner, animal steward, animal guardian for what's going to come next, so that what comes next is not shocking more than it needs to be. You're also logistically assisting in the arrangements. So connection with the right vets, establishment of the right body removal or burying service, making sure everything's in place. Also, making sure at a personal level that this person has taken time off work, is eating, has friends around them, does it at the right time of day, has the money set up for it, has everything in place that they require, making sure all that's there. But then there's also, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a grief counseling component that you have a competency in and qualified for. Is that correct?
Yes, although I preface it of not like psychological or psychiatric, right? Like this is not in lieu
It's
of mental
counseling.
health professional. Yes, exactly.
Counseling.
Yes.
It's not
Yep.
psychiatry. It's not psychotherapy.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Counseling.
Yep. Yeah, and it's um I had a thread there and I lost it from what you were saying, but there's uh you know, it's as much like I almost view it as like holding the container, right? It's holding the container in the space for the human and the animal. And the animal is definitely a key part of this, right? Like I view them almost as the primary client, but of course
Yeah.
it's through the human, but it's helping to keep the focus on them, especially when it comes to things like decision making and what happens next or what is it time for. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say you should do XYZ, but I will invite you to speak of what, or invite someone to speak of what they're experiencing, where things are, et cetera, and reflect it back, right? And offer um and offer the voice of the animal or the experience of the animal as is appropriate and fair, um, to help bring that focus back to them, because it's so easy to get self-centered in that process, right? It's so easy, and I've lived it, and it's very easy to become self-focused and internal without consciously being that way, right? Without trying to be, and to kind of offer that.
Cool. We just had an
Oh,
internet glitch
okay.
and we'll continue.
Okay.
You were saying to offer that, you said.
Okay, yeah, to offer that reflection back, or that container back, um, of the animal's perspective, right? And
Which frankly is exactly what I do in my line of work, just not through
yes,
death. You know,
absolutely.
I'm doing exactly the same thing in the animal's life, bringing it
Yes,
back to the animal, back to the animal, back to the animal.
absolutely.
We have a tangent where we talk about your feelings and what you want and what you need. Okay, okay, okay. But you've
Yep.
hired me here to really be present for the animal's requirements at this time.
Yes.
So, wow, okay. Hmm.
Yep.
It's you know, you're not the first death doula in the world, but you're the first death doula I know that focuses not just on pets,
Hmm.
not just on horses, but someone that I know at a professional level, because I've done a lot of work with you and your horses, and can vouch for you personally. And I know how your animals are to you. So that's really important, that there's an integrity underneath what we're doing. Because
Hmm.
I don't know about you, Tora, but I'm really sick and tired of seeing people talk the talk and not walking the walk. And I know that you
Yes.
walk your walk. You walk this walk. And so that's really, really a value here that I
Hmm.
want people to know about you, is the integrity that you bring to this process. I'll tell just another story, if I may.
Of course, please do.
When I was trimming for the public, there was a client in the south of Spain, very nice person, expat, had a couple of horses very far away. So it was a 3.5 hour drive to get to them.
Hmm.
Um, and they were my last client of the day. So it was a long day. It's leaving at 7, getting home at midnight sort of stuff. But when I first showed up, they said, oh, I've got my warm blood that I brought with me from where I've immigrated from. And then I found a local rescue horse that was down on their luck and needed a good home. Are you there? Oh, are you there? Can you hear me?
Back, I think. I hope.
No, back. You're back?
Hear me back.
You're back?
Back.
You
I
there?
can hear me.
Yes, you're just a little disjointed. We'll just wait a second for the signal to warm up.
All right.
There you are. No problem.
Okay. Yes, there it is.
So they had taken on this local horse that they had rescued, a senior. I need both horses trimmed. Okay, so I showed up, and this senior lost you completely now, and now you're back again.
Back now.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
So this senior horse, when I got out of my car, there was a moment that stole my breath. So when I looked at the horse, I was not judgmental. I was just shocked what I saw. The horse was maybe a 1.5 out of 9 on the Henneke body condition score scale, and they should be a 5, 5.5. So very emaciated. Hooves were a problem, demeanor, everything. It was just horrible. I thought, okay, maybe it's a rescue and they're feeding them up. They were also a hay supplier. So I thought, okay, he's well situated. Feet were bad. I demanded some x-rays, did what I could for him. I said he needs painkillers. He needs this. So, gave my marching orders, came back 4 weeks later, and the horse was worse, not better. And they said, well, I'm trying this and I'm trying that and I'm trying this and I'm trying that. And I'm like, well, we need to be doing blood tests for bloodborne viruses, parasites, diseases. There's something going on. This horse isn't right. So I kept kind of working with them, trying to get this horse to a level. After a few months, the horse was just deteriorating, and they came back with several bloodborne illnesses. After I'd asked for some diagnostics, not one, not two, more than 2 bloodborne illnesses. Not their fault. They inherited this issue. Not their fault. But Torah was their responsibility now. And that's what this is all about. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Yes. They are 2 separate things. And there came a point where I informed the client that I was now going to refuse treatment of this horse, not because I didn't want to trim them, but because I believed it was now, for me, unethical to keep holding this horse together and tiding them over and over to another trim and to another trim. Yes. Improve foot comfort today. They get another 20 minutes of semi-soundness. I said, this horse, he's in his late 20s. This is it. And I've got real concerns that you're going to have an emergency with him, and it's not going to be pretty. So I started working with them. I said, you need to call a vet. I said, call the vet, ask the vet to describe to you what the putting down procedure looks like. Find someone who can remove his body or bury him. Let's set the date. I was basically death doulaing in a way.
Absolutely.
And kind of coaching them towards the decision. I said, you make the decision when you're ready, but she said, when do you think is the right time? I said, you need to make the decision within the next week, because we're looking at weeks, not months with this horse. Well, a few days later, I get a message and the horse was gone, and it was a catastrophe in the end. He had some sort of seizure in the middle of the night, crashed through a fence, ripped a gash in his leg, ran out into the riverbed, careening around. and it was just not pretty. So that was really my lesson. And I was trying to be as gentle as possible. And between you and me, Tora, I wish I hadn't been so supportive of the person. I wish I had centered the horse with them in a way that they could receive as, this is not important. This is not optional. This has to be decided now. There is no other option. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is it. We need to make the choice. I wish I'd had that conversation with them, because I think I was in a unique position to prevent this animal's suffering in the end. And I have to live with that, because I was trying too hard to be nice to them, because they were really good person, and they were really trying their best, absolutely trying their best. But unfortunately, that their best in this scenario ended up in suffering of the animal, and frankly, suffering for them too. That was unnecessary, you know?
Absolutely.
Right.
And I mean, that brings to mind two key things that I always think about. And one is something that, this might sound crazy to some, but Bay told me in his last like few weeks, might even be the last like couple months, because every morning he had the routine of getting up on the bed, and he'd flop, since he was missing his right front leg, he fits perfectly, like right in the crook of your arm, right? So he'd kind of lay like that perfectly. And I remember one morning we were laying like that, and all of a sudden I just heard, there are things that are worse than death.
Ah, ah.
And
I was literally saying this to a colleague of mine like a couple of weeks ago. Oh my God.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I come back to that all the time. There are things that are worse than death. And I can't tell another person what those things might be, but I can tell you that the animals don't fear death like we do. They understand that it is part of this cycle, right? And we used to be so much more in touch with it, and then have removed ourselves more and more. We, of course, I'm talking collective here, right? Have removed it more and more, and there are things that are worse than death. And I have my own standards for things that are worse than death for me personally. I have those for my animals. We all have them, but and the other that ties into as well, this, in my certification work, there was a lot of talk around like a natural death versus a good death, right? Because I think a lot of people will say, well, I want them to have a natural death, right? And there's
None
a
of us have
reminder that it's,
natural deaths. None of us
none
have
of us have
natural.
natural deaths.
No one. None of us.
And natural
Almost none.
deaths are very often not
Pretty.
good,
Sometimes
not
overrated.
pretty.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Like, especially when we're talking horses, especially when we're talking, I mean, any of these animals, right? Like, natural death is often not pretty. And like again, like through my experiences and through my processes, like I would much rather, I mean, I have everything in like planned and in mind for how I want Phoenix's death to be, right? I want it to honor the incredible spirit that she is as best as it can, right? And I would rather make the call and let her go sooner perhaps than necessary, to be able to give her that, instead of keep waiting, and maybe end up in a situation where it's not that way, right? Where there's trauma, or there's extreme pain, or there's emergency situations, or like any of these things, right? And again, like there's no binary to it. There's no hard and fast. There's no like X, Y, and Z. Here's an answer card. You have to drop in and trust yourself, and drop in and trust your animal. And as hard as it is, and it is a process, you have to like resolve. It's not playing God, and it's not robbing them of something. It's instead honoring the life that they have lived, and giving them the exit that we all hope for. I mean, we all say like, I hope that I'll just die in my sleep or whatever. We all say that, right? It's the opportunity to give them that honor and that dignity as best as we can.
It has to be a very personal decision, and many variables must be considered and computed in making such a decision, because having witnessed Lola's passing, which to my mind, my eyes, went on too long. But actually, now that I know what that full circle looked like, she went exactly when she needed to, and I should not have judged it. She went exactly when she needed to, and it was in the right way at the right time. And I needed to trust that my loved one had her right in his crosshairs at all times, and still does. And it's a very personal decision. And again, there are also people who wait just too long and the animals suffer. And then there are also people who, in my view, send the animals too early. So I used to know someone who actually worked for, when COVID hit, they had many horses on their books and no business to support them. Any horse over the age of 22, the vet was called, and they were buried in the pastures at the top of COVID. I used to care for those horses, and they were retired, but the ethos was there's always a space for these animals to retire here. They've given us their service for life. But at the same time, this person had a different mindset, and the mindset was dignity or death. Dignity or death. Dignity or death. And it was a survival situation for not just those horses, but for their herd and for their steward. And so I don't judge that decision. I don't judge that decision. But in my heart of hearts, there were some horses there that had some beautiful life to live. Unfortunately, they couldn't have lived it in that home. They would have had to have been moved on. And there's not enough homes for animals to live a dignified retirement where they're able to be given that quality and that time. There are not enough homes. You and I both know one of fellow students in emotional horsemanship, one of our community members. She runs a retirement center for horses from the hunter-jumper world, where she never meets the owner. The owner puts down a credit card and sends off the horse they've been riding for 15 years to retirement, and they never see those horses again. They say, I'm going to give that horse the life they always should have had. Sorry? The life they always deserve. What? They put down a credit card, ship the horse interstate, and she becomes mum, and she stewards those horses beautifully until the end. She's doing the Lord's work. She's doing the Lord's work, and she's decided that that is her mission in life. That's what she was put here to do, is to provide that home for horses who typically wouldn't get it. I can get fiery about the way people use horses and throw them away. I can get fiery about that. I know you can too. But if you can, just speak for a moment to people using euthanasia as a get out of jail free card so that they don't have the encumbrance or inconvenience or expense of a horse they quote unquote can't use anymore. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. And actually I was speaking with
This
that
same
mutual
person.
friend client the other day. Yep. And so I can get very actually, this is why I took a long time to come to this work. It has poked at me for years, and I was just like, nope, I can't do it because I can't deal with X, Y, or Z, right?
Right.
Because I am very opinionated. However, I have grown and am able to hold a more non-judgmental container when needed. But I personally, I will only speak for myself in this because we're all different. I personally will do every single thing in my power to be present when my animal passes, whether it's planned or not, right? Because I also do, I want to put a pin in the planned or not thing. We'll come back to that in a second. I understand that some people don't want to or feel they can't, or, whatever the circumstances might be, send the horse off.
Well,
I agree that
it's too hard. It's too hard for them, and that's okay that it's too hard. And so passing that task on to someone who can is actually extremely wise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I said to this mutual friend the other day, I said, on a personal level, yes, like it's hard to think of those horses not getting to live this life all the time, right? But at least they're getting some of it at the end, right? At a time, and who knows how long that end is. Hopefully they get years, right? Like the using the euthanasia, it's been an interesting thing because I have grown again personally to be a bit more comfortable with that choice when the circumstances are right. Meaning, I'm in the midst of putting on paper, because it's been in my head for a long time, what the plans would be for my animals if a bus were to hit me tomorrow, right? Knock on wood, doesn't have to deal with it, but it's something that we have to think about. And of course, I have, plans in place for places, a trusted place they could go, the funds in place for them, etc. But for me, part of those plans will include that if the plan that is written in place cannot be upheld for whatever reason, I would rather they be humanely euthanized instead of passed down the road, because I see what happens to horses that are passed down the road.
100%.
And especially because I have 3 horses who are not ridden anymore. I mean, Sky is 21, right? So she's old anyway. Riser is not trained under saddle very much. I've ridden her, of course, but she's not a riding horse at this point in time. And of course, Arwen is a little pony, right? So, but people wanted to try to ride her. So like, especially in that circumstance where, and you know me, I am not one of those people that says, well, horses have to be ridden, but I know that that's still prevalent, right? It can still be hard for people to justify the cost of horse keeping and horse ownership when there's not
something in it for them.
Yes, when there's not kind of an exchange in that sense, right? So, again, it's so individual, but for me, like I can absolutely see and honor that choice because, again, I come back to there are things worse than death.
Yes.
Right? And it's still not a decision to be taken lightly. It's still not something to just wake up one day and be like, well, I'm tired with this. Let's just do it. Right. Like, I believe there should still be some checks in place, in the form of vets or another person or whatnot.
Exhausting options. Have you actually looked for other homes? Is there actually someone else who's willing and able to take them on? Or are you just sending them down the river to God knows what fate?
Right. Right. But in lieu of that, it's like I can see, and again, especially like in thinking of it again for me personally with my ladies, like if I'm gone and if the people whom I have arranged to care for them cannot, or for whatever reason, or if there ever comes a time when that happens, I don't want them to be then sent down the river, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, well then let them go, because, and again, this is where my shamanic lens comes into it, because I personally firmly believe and have experienced that is not the end, right? It's the end of that physical being, the physical form, but it's not the end of their spirit, and it's not the end of their being. And so I view it now as their transition into whatever is the next great beyond for them on their journey. And I would much rather they go find that perhaps a bit earlier than live with circumstances or situations that I would not abide for.
Yes. Yes. Emphatically, yes. I fully support the decision to discerningly euthanize animals that have run out of luck, run out of time, and run out of value, not in my eyes, but value in the eyes of the society we live in. We have to be sober about the fact of the matter of the society we live in. Society does not value horses who can't be used for riding. Our society, Tora, you and I, we are not that. We deeply value animals that can't be used in that manner. And there are many other societies that value them that way. We're not the only one, but that is still the minority and the fringe, unfortunately, for better or worse. And so those horses who are in those places, where they're out of luck, out of time, out of skills, and sending them down the river would be maybe they'd get another 6 months of quote unquote use until the wheels start falling off, and then they find themselves in a kill pen sore with, it can be really terrible. Instead, calling the vet proactively and giving them a respectful end on a good day when you're still able to control the variables is better. I would say that wouldn't be better if domestic horses, were an endangered species, but they're not. We have too many horses and not enough people, and there are thousands coming every year, and there are less and less homes that are willing to afford the amount of problems horses are being born with and are developing due to riding and training, which is some of the issues we're focusing on. But it's big work you're doing, and I want to throw my whole weight behind you.
Thank you.
How can I help? Basically, is my question. How can I help? Anyone listening, if you are looking at a horse in a pasture right now, in your mind's eye or out your window, and there that horse has started going on ahead. One of mine has. Caleb started. Or if you've got a cat or a dog or a guinea pig or a rat or a goldfish that has started going on ahead, and that animal is meaningful enough to you that you are concerned, confused about what the next steps are, I would like to avail Tora Troop and your services to these people who might be listening to this podcast now and in the future. Please don't hesitate. I can warmly and confidently recommend that your container would be correct.
Thank you, Lucky. I appreciate that. I mean, that means a lot. And it's, as you know, I just launched earlier this week, technically open, waiting for people to find me, and I know that they will. And I truly approach this work and entering that space with animals and their people with the most reverence and gratitude and respect possible. I mean, it is a sacred space, and I don't use that word lightly. And if I can provide any sort of guidance and relief and support for the animal and their human, then I'll have done my job.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining me on my podcast today.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to where this goes. I'll be watching with interest, looking forward to seeing you in our mentorship, and you're coming to visit me in Spain this year. So I'm looking forward to that. Anyone who wants to find Tora, all of her information is in the show notes, or they can find you at Tora. Would you like to describe? Where can they find you?
Yes, I'm online at cosmicheartline.com. Instagram is at cosmic_heartline, and Facebook Cosmic Heartline as well.
Cosmic Heartline. Thank you, Tora.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Take care.
This has been the Emotional Horsemanship Podcast with myself, Lockie Phillips, and my friend and guest, Tora Troop. If you'd like to find out more about Tora, you can find all of her business details for Cosmic Heartline and its various services in the show notes of this episode or in the show description of this episode. Please feel free to like and subscribe to this podcast, tell your friends about it, and I hope you'll consider listening again in the future. Thanks for being here. Take care, and I'll see you next time.